phase mismatch, why a perfectly good tool can land flat, and how to spot the mismatch before the session goes off. Picture a session that felt oddly flat, even though you used a perfectly good tool. The client was there, you were engaged, the exercise itself wasn't flawed, and yet nothing quite landed. 9 times out of 10, the tool wasn't the problem. It showed up in the wrong phase. This is phase mismatch, and it's worth understanding in both directions. Mismatch runs 2 ways, and both can look like the same flat session. Too early, you bring an action tool onto a client who's still making sense of why they're stuck. The structure arrives before there's anything solid to build on. They comply, they fill in the boxes, but there's no traction because the groundwork hasn't happened yet. Too late, you bring a discovery tool onto a client who's desperate to move. The exploration drags them backward when what they need is forward motion. They get impatient, the session loses energy, and you both feel it. Same category of error, opposite direction, both avoidable. The most common version is the first one, an action tool in a discovery moment. A client is still exploring. Their values aren't clear yet. The picture of what they want is still forming. They're making sense of their situation. And the coach introduces a planning or goal-setting tool. The client doesn't push back. They try to engage. But the tool asks them to build toward a destination they haven't found yet. So they do the exercise without really doing the work. They fill in the boxes. They produce an output. And nothing shifts. There's a real difference between a client completing a tool and a client being moved by one. Phase mismatch produces the first. Only phase fit produces the second. When a client pulls back from a tool, goes quiet, gives short answers, seems to comply without really engaging, most coaches read that as resistance. The client is difficult, or guarded, or not ready to do the work. Before you land on that interpretation, ask a different question first. Was this the right phase for this tool? Client behavior that looks like resistance is often client behavior that makes complete sense. They were asked to do work the phase wasn't ready for. ICFs, maintains presence competency, asks us to stay attuned to what's actually happening in the client's experience, not just what we hoped would happen. Sometimes what's actually happening is a timing mismatch, not a character trait. Pause here for a moment. Recall a session that felt flat, one you still remember because something didn't land the way you hoped. Ask, was the tool wrong, or was its timing wrong? Be generous with yourself and honest. Those 2 questions lead to very different learning and very different adjustments. Good, hold that. The fix isn't complicated. When you name the phase before you reach for a tool, most mismatch becomes avoidable before it happens. You know what kind of work this phase does, so you know what kind of tool belongs here. The loop is short. Locate the phase, match the tool family, choose from what fits. It doesn't add time to the session. It replaces a guess with a read. And when you read wrong, because sometimes you will, you recognize it faster. You see the flat energy and you know to reorient rather than press forward. The phase is your anchor.